Hi guys. So today I want to talk about land, language, and identity and how these three are interconnected. Please bear with me. I am going to try and do this in one go, in one setting. I don't have a script that I'm reading from. Um, so I hope this is going to go well. So basically, have you wondered how, I don't know, have you wondered how a development of a language, you know, when a language is developed, how much it's influenced by the climate, the ecosystem, the birds, the animals, the trees, where, all these surrounding factors, how all these factors influence the development of a language. So, for example, if you think about languages in southern tropical islands that are surrounded with a lot of water, imagine the amount of vocabulary that are linked with the sea life or the ocean and the wind. Um, yeah, in and and how much of their day-to-day life they would have so many, let's say, stories or idioms that are linked with water, the good and the bad, let's say the flow of life, and when the sea gets angry, like the tsunami, the storm, in and in comparison to a language that are found in the desert region. So, for example, imagine the lack of words maybe that are linked with water, or how their relationship with water is like in their language in comparison to the water people and their relationship with water and language. I hope that's making sense. Um, because, for example, water is essential for our survival. So I can only imagine, I haven't done much research, these are just thoughts. The people from the desert regions, life must be a lot more harsher, and yeah, maybe the way they see things, but then they might have a special relationship with sand, and they must have a lot of stories linked with, or language linked with the date trees, the the snakes that are found in the desert, or the creepy crawlies in general. So yeah, I always find language really interesting depending on where it's from, because the language tells a lot of story of of the land it's from, of the people, of the history. I now want to go into language and identity. I don't even know where to begin, because identity and one's language and identity are very much, yeah, you can tell a lot. When you listen to somebody's accent, you can say a lot about where they're from. My English accent, I've got a mix of different accents, and you can tell I don't really have a fixed accent, so I don't mine is a bit all over the place. um, but yeah, language and identity very, very important. I'm gonna kind of enter the political territory, but I'm not gonna say too many things explicitly. But I just wanted to kind of slide this in. Basically, I sometimes think in Europe, sometimes, like in the last couple of years, there's a lot of like political tensions, a lot of talks on immigration, refugees, asylum seekers, and I I get both sides. And sometimes I think, though, I feel like actually all this tension is this to do with the threat of identity. hear me out. Let's say you have the native land, let's say England or France or Germany, where you have the native language, okay? But on this native land with these native speakers and this native language, over the years, you have different groups of communities that came over to work and live. And, so you have bubbles of different communities who speak different languages. So when the native people feel like their identity is under threat, and I think this is where a lot of tension comes from. I think it's very tribalistic, and then I often think all these tensions, um, it's a tribal tension that's causing all these socio-political commentaries and actions that we see in society. I don't want to, yeah, and I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But I also want to talk about the communities, actually, because I think it's really interesting to do with their children, because these parents who come from wherever, they could be from an Asian country or West Africa or I don't know, the Middle East. The ethnic parents, when they come over, they tend to they want to instill the sense of they still, when you're in a host nation, they still want to connect back to the homeland. So often what we find is, there are communities or cultural hubs that are created. So the parents have a sense of belonging and identity because they're not from this land, they're from a different land. So they have a sense of identity and belonging. And in turn, their children also understand where their family comes from and who they are. But sometimes you have this thing where the children, when they grow up, either they grow up in a very, they're only surrounded by the community people. They don't integrate with the mainstream, let's say the community. Even if they go to school, even if they go to uni, they will tend to hang out with the same people from there. This is going to get a lot more complicated than I thought. Yeah. Yeah. And so they know a lot about the community, but they don't know much about the country that they're born into, or where they're brought up in, because they are brought up in their cultural hub more than the country. Um, and their identity is more linked back. Well, yeah, they're linked back where their parents that come from. So they will only watch the movies. Um, yeah, they wouldn't, like, let's say, I'm just thinking, like, if they're from in India or Turkey, they only watch that language movies and their relationalities to that country rather than the. This is a really interesting topic. Actually, I don't even think I can make a video on this. Like, I think it's more of a should be a conversation, really. I think basically what I want to talk about, what I want to touch topic on is about the importance of integration, but also being in touch with your roots. It becomes, I think, children with um like immigrant children, I think these kids have a lot of identity issues because they're not really from that particular land. Like their forefathers came from, and from a different land, and they still have the cultural thing, but then it's like they're between worlds. um and I guess you have to choose. And that's what a lot of kids or adults, when they grow up, they end up choosing. This is already 9 minutes long. I only want to make a 10-minute video, but this was a little short video on language, identity, and land. I hope it made sense. Maybe not. I don't know. Thanks for watching. Bye.